Florence, December 6, 1479. It's the dead of night, and the unofficial ruler of the Florentine Republic is sneaking out of his own city. Before leaving, Lorenzo de' Medici left a letter for the Signoria, the city's governing council. In it, he wrote that the enemy armies currently ravaging the Tuscan countryside were driven by a singular hatred directed entirely at him. His plan was to sail south, directly into the capital of the enemy coalition. He was going to surrender himself to the King of Naples to either negotiate a peace or face execution. With Florence on the brink of total collapse, Lorenzo calculated that offering himself as a willing hostage was the only remaining play to save the state. The crisis had started a year and a half earlier, in April 1478, when a rival banking family known as the Pazzi attempted to decapitate the Medici leadership during Sunday Mass. As the priests elevated the host at the altar, the assassins struck. Lorenzo managed to fight them off and escape into the sacristy with a minor neck wound, but his younger brother, Giuliano, was brutally stabbed to death on the cathedral floor. The Florentine public rallied behind Lorenzo. Within hours, angry mobs hunted down the conspirators, stringing them up from the high windows of the government headquarters, including one of the key plotters, the Archbishop of Pisa. Executing an archbishop without trial enraged his patron in Rome, Pope Sixtus IV. In retaliation, the Pope excommunicated Lorenzo, placed Florence under a spiritual interdict, and forged a massive military alliance with King Ferdinand I of Naples to invade Tuscany. A failed localized coup d'état had rapidly mutated into a total geopolitical war aimed at wiping out the Florentine state. By the summer of 1479, the papal Neapolitan armies had chewed through Florence's southern defenses, capturing strategic fortresses and systematically looting the Tuscan countryside. Leading the Neapolitan forces was Alfonso, the Duke of Calabria, who easily outmaneuvered the mercenary troops Florence had hired to protect its borders. Inside the city walls, the situation was deteriorating. Supply lines from the countryside were severed, leading to widespread starvation. To make matters worse, an outbreak of the plague began spreading through the cramped, heavily taxed, and paralyzed populace. The traditional Medici formula for maintaining power, relying on vast personal wealth to hire external mercenary armies, had completely collapsed under the pressure. Realizing his military options were exhausted, Lorenzo arrived at the heavily fortified enemy stronghold in Naples on December 27th. He had come to negotiate directly with King Ferdinand, commonly known as Ferrante. Ferrante was a notoriously ruthless monarch who had spent his entire reign brutally suppressing rebellious nobles and violently defending his throne. He was most famous for his macabre Black Museum. Ferrante had a habit of embalming his murdered political enemies, dressing them in their everyday clothes, and keeping them propped up around his court as a psychological weapon to intimidate his guests. Lorenzo was stepping voluntarily into the lair of a man who could easily have him executed and added to the collection on a whim. Lorenzo arrived with a massive, magnificent entourage, projecting an aura of immense wealth and unbothered confidence to his enemies. He immediately launched a public relations campaign to win over the city. In one highly visible stunt, Lorenzo purchased the freedom of 100 Neapolitan galley slaves, gave them spending money, and dressed them in vibrant red silk before turning them loose. Lorenzo made a calculated geopolitical pitch. He warned Ferrante that if the Papal States swallow Florence, they would become a superpower on Naples' border. Furthermore, prolonged war in Tuscany leaves Naples exposed to a French invasion from the north, trapping Ferrante between two enemies. He also engaged in back-channel networking. Lorenzo leaned heavily on cultural diplomacy, leveraging his relationship with the highly educated noblewoman Ippolita Maria Sforza to bypass official channels and charm Ferrante's inner circle. By shifting the battlefield away from military tactics and toward public relations and psychological manipulation, Lorenzo systematically neutralized a vastly superior armed force. The 3-month charm offensive worked. By late February 1480, Lorenzo had successfully negotiated a peace treaty directly with King Ferrante. The peace was permanently cemented by a sudden external shock. A massive Ottoman invasion force landed in southern Italy at the city of Otranto, forcing the Pope to abandon his grudge with Florence and deal with the new threat. When Lorenzo returned to Florence, he was greeted by hysterical, adoring crowds. The citizens welcomed him as a hero, firmly cementing his legendary historical title, Il Magnifico, or the Magnificent. Without winning a single military battle, Lorenzo secured a diplomatic victory and saved his republic from total annihilation. But this triumph leaves us with a historical paradox. If Florence was heavily taxed and besieged, how did a man on the brink of ruin afford a 3-month royal residency and the cash purchase of 100 slaves? This chart reveals the hidden reality of the Medici finances. As we can see, the bank's liabilities were skyrocketing, dwarfing their rapidly shrinking liquid assets. During the war, the Medici Bank was in a state of catastrophic debt and absolute insolvency. To fund his diplomatic theater, Lorenzo blurred the lines between state resources and family business. He quietly raided the Monte delle Doti, a public treasury fund meant exclusively to provide dowries for Florentine girls. Lorenzo saved his city and forged a golden era of peace by wielding cultural capital as a weapon. But he paid for this illusion of invincibility by acting exactly like the tyrant his enemies always claimed he was.